How many people that live around you do you know who had cancer?
My neighbor's husband here, my neighbor across from her, down the street, next, I mean, it's so many.
That list includes Lydia Gerard's husband, 67-year-old Walter Gerard, a carpenter and outdoorsman who loved to hunt, fish, and play golf. He died of kidney cancer after spending his entire life living in a place known as Cancer Alley, Louisiana.
It hurts.
It does. He's the one that got me into this fight.
Gerard isn't afraid to make that fight vocal. Her house is essentially surrounded by polluting industrial plants. Our drone shows the bird's eye view.
Why don't you move?
I can't. First of all, this is my home. The level of income is not conducive for me to move. My property value is not what it should be or what it could be because of the plant. So I'm kind of here, and it's home, it's family.
In a way, do you feel stuck?
I do. I do.
Gerard lives in one of more than 1,000 hotspots our partners at ProPublica identified across the country, all on this map, a first-of-its-kind analysis that finds for at least 250,000 Americans, air pollution from industrial plants is elevating the cancer risk to a level the federal government considers unacceptable. What's more, nearly 74 million are exposed to risk higher than what the EPA says it strives for.
When you look at it, see the people that's being affected. Don't just see an area, a dot on the map. That's not what we are. We should have the right to breathe clean air.
ProPublica's analysis of federal data has never been done before, not even by the government agency that collects it. The EPA collects hazardous emissions data from every large industrial facility in the country. But when the EPA looks at risk, it doesn't take into account how the risks from these plants add up near your house or on your block. This map does that.
In your mind, it's a bad news map.
It's a very bad news map. It shows the cumulative impacts of all the toxic chemicals the communities are being exposed to.
Wilma Subra has spent around 5 decades dedicated to her work as a scientist studying environmental concerns. Even to this chemist, used to looking at data on dangerous and deadly emissions, this map is startling.
You have to look at that and say, is it acceptable for me to continue to live in this environment? And if not, what can we do to get those community members relocated out of harm's way?
The analysis finds hotspots in every state, but 20 stand out, the most toxic hotspots in the country. A quarter of these are in the state of Texas. The area around Port Arthur, Texas, has some of the nation's highest estimated increased cancer risks. In Port Neches, chemical plant towers are visible from an elementary school less than a mile away. 1.5 miles in the other direction, children play at a park with metal structures looming, the same ones visible over the high school football field. The lifetime cancer risk here calculated at 1 in 3,900, meaning about 1 in 4,000 people is likely to get cancer from long-term exposure. That rate more than 2 times higher than what the EPA finds minimally acceptable. Following the curve of the Gulf toward the Houston area, another major hotspot with some of the worst cancer risks sits La Porte. For some of the homes closest to petrochemical plants, the estimated excess cancer risk is around 3 times the EPA's acceptable level. Chemical facilities are abundant here. One plant even has a playground for its employees and their guests, just down the road from its facility that emits ethylene oxide, a chemical that can cause lymphoma with just 4 years of exposure. Other hotspots include parts of the Chicago suburbs, Calvert City, Kentucky, Morganton, North Carolina, St. Albans, West Virginia, and Decatur, Alabama.
It makes you feel so sad. and it makes me feel so sad and hurt inside.
That's where we found Doris Baker, who has a saying for those pollutants.
A silent killer, and that's what we have. It's something that you can't see, you can't really fight back.
She didn't know her part of the country would be considered one of the hundreds of toxic hotspots until we told her.
We should have been warned a long time ago, because believe me, somebody knew about these chemicals and how the level was of the chemicals a long time before now.
The EPA has this data but hasn't analyzed it like this to see where the risk exceeds the rules. An EPA employee for 3 decades who oversaw this data for the federal government told our partners at ProPublica they always told us don't make a big deal of it. They didn't want to make anything public that would raise questions about why the EPA hadn't done anything to regulate that facility. Another former EPA employee told ProPublica, "What I find annoying is that the EPA has the same information at their disposal and they don't use it." The EPA noted air toxics emissions nationwide declined drastically between 1990 and 2017 and says the EPA is focused on and committed to identifying and addressing existing, emerging, and future air toxics issues in the United States. That's of little comfort to those who see this map with recent data showing toxic emissions, poison in the air.
How do you react to seeing that?
It kind of makes you speechless. You know, what do you say? Who do you say it to get people to listen? And I'm so thankful that you're here doing this, you know, letting more people know what's really going on and our risk.